Okay. No, keystroke loggers are fun. I have not worked in a company where at one point or another we didn't need to monitor an employee. And what we wanted to do to monitor the employee was not trigger their antivirus either. So if you download a commercial keystroke logger, that will usually trigger an antivirus because it's looking for those, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to teach you how to do a real quick and dirty one, but some caveats first, all right? So why would I want a keystroke logger? Most companies will purchase software to do all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. But when you're doing your own DIY keystroke logger, that means it's usually not going to be caught by any antivirus or any security devices that may be on the boxes. The user won't notice them, right? And that's a big one, right? The only time you want to do this is based on a court order or request or order from the legal department or other responsible party in the company that can take the fall for you. Get it in writing if it's from your boss to go monitor another one of your coworkers. All right? Are keystroke loggers illegal? Not necessarily. Right? Keystroke loggers are found on an amazing number of devices in an amazing number of legal circumstances. So Harvard Law kind of came out, and I thought this was interesting. Courts in some jurisdictions have decided to take the step to prohibit the surreptitious use of keyloggers, which means if you think your wife's cheating on you, that data may not be admissible in court, but it will still lead to a divorce. Right? If you think your husband's cheating on you, it may not be admissible in court, but may get you an axe in the chest. Right? So it's kind of one of those things, right? All right, despite all the apparent options, there's state, there's federal, there's local. All right, so there's the position of law as of 2012 kind of leaves you in limbo. It may or may not be used. So your keystroke logger may or may not be legal in terms of what's being done, and given that we have methods for surveillance of employees, strings, spouses, and other stuff, it makes for an interesting day. Yes? We'll cover that one in a minute. I have a really good thing on that one. All right? So employers will do this, right? So guarantee that most employers are in some way or the other monitoring how you use the internet, right? Even Highline monitors how you use the internet. All right, now the cool part is if you have a phone with LTE, 4G, 3G, you can just bypass the internal network and go use the Verizon network. But even Verizon or AT&T, there's a certain level of monitoring that's going on the internet at all times. Right, so just get used to that. Right? Employers will sometimes install keylogging programs to record these keystrokes to make sure you're not doing anything stupid. Right? Now, the interesting part about that is that, yes, there's the Stored Communication Act and the Federal Wiretap Act, along with some state laws that may offer you limited protection. But if you're doing something illegal, like breaking into someone's bank account or downloading child porn or anything like that, right, then your rights to whatever just went flying out the door because you're doing something illegal. Right? The employer has every right to protect their company. The statistic is that the majority of porn surfing want their children or their spouse or their husband to find out that they have a porn monkey on their back.
Right. So 82% of all porn surfing happens during the hours of 9 to 5, Monday through Friday at work. Right? And companies are aware of this and they want to monitor it. So your email's already monitored as well, right? And you're going to have acceptable use policies and waivers if you sign into certain DoD networks, consent to monitoring. If you sign into other networks, consent to monitoring. Website monitoring, your employer is absolutely, most certainly, doing your internet usage, all right? Even Highline checks out student internet usage because we want to find out if anyone's doing anything illegal on the network. Right? And this is where keyloggers come in. They're part of all this whole monitoring suite that people are doing. Right? Yes?
Is this a keylogging software you use?
Most antiviruses or malware bytes or spybot search and destroy will find any keylogger on your system, which is why we sometimes need to roll our own. Right? Because then that will bypass it. A lot of antivirus, a lot of malware bytes works on what's called a signature. A known signature of that software. So if it meets a certain hash value, then it's known malware, right? And that's how it finds it. When you roll your own, it has its own hash value. It can be Unix the same way. Unix is the same way.
So like you mean commercial, so like they're like, oh, Keystroke or whatever, like a commercial keylogger.
Mm-hmm.
They know it, and so they add it to their database.
Yep, exactly.
They're constantly adding things to their database to know the commercial.
Mm-hmm.
But anytime you make a new software,
Then the antivirus doesn't know about it. Absolutely.
It's not looking for strings of code that it knows are certain.
No, it's looking for a hash value for known code values. Yes, Jacob.
Basically, when you're doing the antivirus scan, it's just like taking the hash value of all your files and
Comparing them against a database. And antivirus is anywhere between 90 and 95% effective. Right? So there's always going to be 5% of any software that you download that's not going to pass muster. Right? Now, what about my right to privacy? All right. So we share a lot. We're a very sharing culture. We like our Facebooks and our MySpaces and our Google Pluses and our Instagram. The Fourth Amendment applies whenever the government, whether local, state, or federal. The Fourth Amendment does not protect you from privacy invasions by people other than the government. So it won't protect you from privacy invasion from your workplace, your spouse, your friend, your child, your mother, your father. All right? It doesn't cover this. Yes, sir. No, because you sign an acceptable use policy and you consent to monitoring every time you log into any government system. Right? So when people start screaming about the Fourth Amendment, it's only about the government monitoring you, not everybody else in their vested interest. Right? Interesting thought. How do keyloggers work? Okay, so most of common keyloggers work on what's called a system hook, right? And what we do is we trap or we intercept the data that you type into your keyboard because it has to go up a wire or over a wireless network to your computer where it's processed and interpreted and then thrown in. All right? So that system hook intercepts a notification that a key has been pressed, right? Any key, it doesn't matter which one. Find the any key on your keyboard, right? Now, using WinAPI set Windows hook, when you write this in your Windows PowerShell, right, you'll be actually using the WinAPI to do this, right? When you're using it in Linux, it's a little bit more straightforward because what you're going to be is you're going to be using what's called a trap, right? So big difference. In Windows, it's a hook. In Linux, it's a trap. Repeat after me. In Windows, it's a hook. In Linux, it's a trap. It's a trap. Someone break out your Admiral Akbar kind of thing. All right? So, but I really kind of want you to understand that difference. It's like the Windows model. You have parent-child relationship in Linux for programs. You have the threading model in Windows for programs. So same kind of concept, just a different way of approaching the problem with the solution. So if we take a look at example A, and we're going to go over example A, I just kind of picked and chose sections I want you to do. The first thing we do is we declare the variables. Where do we want to log it? And God forbid that this is the home of the user that you're actually doing. Right? All right? So you're going to want a directory that the user may not be aware of. Current user. You can use whoami or any of the other bits and pieces of it. The log time, when was it actually collected? Because without a time date stamp on that log, forensically its value is what without a date time stamp? Absolutely stinking worthless. All right, and then you want to make sure it can't be modified. All right, so log file, current user and the log time. Attempt, how many times do I want to attempt to get this? 0 means I'm going to keep on trying forever. 1 means I'll try once. 2 means I'll try twice. Right? 0 means I'll keep on trying to do this. And then test to make sure the log file actually exists. All right? Because again, if we need to do this for forensics, if I've been asked to do this because we think this guy is like going into the legal side of the network and looking at all the legal documents or going into HR databases, then yeah, I need to have all this stuff. And I want to test to see if I have a log with already that name on it. Yes?
How much more complicated does the script get when you're tracking mouse clicks?
A lot more. Because you actually have to do XY positions and you have to a certain timeout rate. How many times do you want to do XY across the screen? It's a lot easier to do a screen grab, right, rather than tracking mouse movements. And a screen grab is just grab the internal grabber for Unix or Windows, snipping tool or whatever, run it in the background, and then just do screen snaps across the board. Yes, sir? This only applies to Linux right now. We'll do the Windows one in a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that we understood that it's a hook or it's Admiral Akbar. Because it really is a trap. And I just hit the table, and it felt good. All right. Then, hit the wall. All right. So then we want to write the function, right? So we want to write the function where we're actually going to do the work that we want to do. So create log. While we're doing a test log file, checks for existence of the file, right? Do log files increment by 1 and try again. So we want to keep on attempting that. If we find that log file, right? If we find a log file already with that name, we want to keep on incrementing it. Because they may log in, they may log out, they may log in, they may log out. They'll go to lunch, they'll lock their screen, they'll do other crazy stuff, right? And then test it, touch the log file once a viable file name has been found, and then chmod to 600. What's wrong with 600? Only root can do anything with it, so if I'm a regular user, I can't write to this log file. So I'm kind of screwed, right? You actually have to invoke it as the user to get it to write the log file. But once the log file is written, you want to change you want to move it or then change the perms over to 600. So there's a little bit more stuff you need to do in here once it's done, once you've trapped it. All right? So chmod 600 will make it so that only root can read it and write to it. Right? After you've got a good file name. All right, then do the work. So on close, when I close the log, when they log out, if the log file tests for existence of the log, then write everything that we've got to it, right? We close it, we test it. If the log file did not work, then there's no record of keystroke logging, so you may want to throw this as an error, right? But the last thing you want to do is throw this echo to the user, right? And that's exactly what this does. It throws that echo to the user. It says, log file does not exist, no record of keystroke logging exists. If I saw that show up on my computer, how many times would I freak out? Right? It would turn into the Ren and Stimpy show about overnight. So there's a few issues with version A, and that it gives the user way too much knowledge about what's going on. Right? Because again, most users don't want to see, oh, hey, I keystroke logged your butt. And the first thing they're going to do is they're going to be calling up help desk, or if they're really doing something bad, they're going to start diving through that computer. Right? They are going to dive through that computer and find everything they can do. They'll do a local privilege escalation. They'll try to get root. And next thing you know, your case is blown wide open. Right? So, few issues there, right? And then chmod 400 log file guarantees read-only matter. One of the other things I do, too, is I would do a hash value. I would compute a hash on it. Right? Because that hash value is what you're going to want in your forensics class to make sure that that file has not been modified. Right? And then it kills -9, but it puts the output to dev null, which means there'll be no output to the user. So they don't know that this process was killed. So dev null is sort of like the bit bucket in Windows. And a bit bucket is a place where things go to die quietly and silently. All right? So dev null is the place where things go to die quietly. All right. Now, is a trap. Close log on exit 0 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, any of the combinations on a way that a person can log in or log out of the system, right? When you log out, you'll see exit 26, or you'll see exit 19, or you'll see exit 2. That's a trap code that says how the program actually ended, whether they control-C'd it, control-Z'd it, closed the window while it was still operating, or all the rest. Then it wants you to create the log based on everything that you kept in memory, and then script it out, and close the log, and then exit. All right? So I would leave these trap codes in place because I don't expect you to know all the trap codes. These are the most common ones for how a person exits a program or how they log out. All right? The only other problem, too, is that they actually store everything up in memory. So if I turn around and I'm running things in memory, and then I turn around and I do something that's like big data or something else that's labor-intensive like Adobe Acrobat, or any of the Adobe products, or I'm making a movie or something else, I may run into memory contention. The computer will run slow, and someone's going to call the help desk, and help desk probably won't know that they're being keylogged. And help desk will come and take a look at their computer and go, oh my God, what's this? And then they'll call security, and then what happens to your case? It's blown. Right? Because again, we don't want to let the person know that this is happening. Right? So one of the things you may want to do is, instead of storing everything they're doing in memory, is write as they go. Right? Mm-hmm. The whole script keeps and stores everything in memory as you're going through and gives way too much user output. Right? And when you see the word create log here, what it does is it goes and pulls whatever it's writing in memory and actually goes and creates the log based on the DateTime name that it was able to pull up earlier.
So this is what you're saying while they're doing it.
Uh-huh. Yep. Now, there's two examples in here. One is A and one is B. There's two different ways of doing this, right? A is really straightforward. Gives a lot of really cool stuff to the user, right? This one actually sets up reporting via email as a distro list, right? So we make a distro list called logman, and we allow logman to be sent. We make that alias in our email system, whether it's Windows or Linux, and that way you make sure that those logs are sent to the lawyer first, right? And to human resources, so you never have to touch them, which is even more awesome. Because once they're in a lawyer's hands, they're attorney-client privilege. Once they're in human resources' hands, they're a clean record, right? So this one actually solves the solution a little bit differently, right? So it sets up that email alias first, which I thought was interesting, right? Then it does a cleanup on exit, right? So it wants to clean up exit and all the rest of it. It kill -9s everything that cannot be trapped, right? But it creates a logdir and log file based on DateTime stamp, right? And calls it an audit report and sends it off over to Logman Manager, right? It compresses it and then drops any extraneous copies to dev null. So there's no record left behind on the computer. It's actually a little bit more sneaky, right? And then exit out, because it will then write the file out and we're done. Right? Sets the trap, same numbers, right? Trap on cleanup exit. And then it goes in and declares the variables, the date, time, where are we going to do it, where are we going to put it. He puts it right in someone else's directory, right? Which is probably not the place you want to put it, right? Log file, this host, log name. It touches it. He sets vi. He uses vi to store all this stuff. Vi can be run in the background really easily. Right? And vi will do a line-by-line output based on what it's coming across from the keyboard. Because remember, you're trapping the keyboard with this. So vi will actually trap it in the background without a problem. Which I thought a unique solution. You could probably use Nano or Pico, but Nano and Pico are built to be up front, ready to go, where vi can actually be used in the background. Right? And then sets command prompt, right, for this host, and then pulls the current working directory where the user is. Yes? There's more than one way to skin the cat, right? And how someone else builds the script just kind of gives me their signature. So yeah, you can do this just about any way you want, but he wanted to make sure that he got the mail service set up first. That if that mail service doesn't exist, then I have to go do other things. Now he forgot to put in anything else to do other than send it to Logman, right? But you don't have to declare your variables first. Everyone thinks differently in how they organize. And that's why there's no one wrong or there's no one right way to do scripting. Right? Each of you is unique. The way I'm going to tell how you guys worked in groups is how similar things are across tables. Right? And that way I'll know whose style of code actually predominated over an individual style. You have a very unique style. I'm going to be able to tell your code right off the bat that this is your authentic, you did it, because you have a very unique style. So if you ever write malware, I know where I'm going to find you. Right? But every coder has their own unique signature and their own unique way of doing it. All right, then he sets his running parameters. Now his problem is chmod 77774, giving full control permission to the owner and the group. Right? In the script, logdir, log file, monitoring session. Then he goes ahead and changes it, sets permission to read, write, and execute for the owner and the group. But it's a log file, so do I really need read, write, execute? No. All I really need is read, write, right? For the owner and the group. And that's where this gets to be interesting, is if it's my boss that asked me to do it, right, for my coworker, do I really honestly want my coworkers, the rest of the people in that work group, to be able to read the log file? Probably not. So I would make an individual group or something if I had to. Yes, sir. Execute on a file.txt is usually a sign that something weird's going on, right? So if you're dealing with someone who's computer savvy, You want your permissions to look like everything else. A text file is a text file, right? And so if you leave it as read, write, execute on your text file, that can be an indication that something weird's going on. I know with me, if I go through and I'm looking at my user directory and I see something that's executable that shouldn't be, where's the first place I'm going to look? Especially if I've got access to it, right? Right? And then he cleans up, exits, and then he closes the function out. All right, so the one thing I really want you guys to understand, there's always more than one solution. The only thing that's consistent across both those solutions is the traps, right? Because those are very common across any Unix version that you've got. So that would be the only thing I would expect to see consistent. Both function very well for what they're doing. There's some funky stuff in there that will preclude them working correctly for what you want to do, right? Now, I don't recommend that you go bug your computer at home because you really don't want to know what the other people in your house are doing with the computer. You don't want to know, trust me, all right? All right? Sometimes you need to write a keylogger that's required for work and you'll not want to trigger an antivirus malware response. This is usually the reason why we write our own keyloggers, all right? And again, you can tear this thing down to 3 lines, right? 3 lines of code, you're good to go. Now be careful, it's pretty cool, but it can lead to liability at work if not sufficiently covered by authorization for management. In other words, if you write a keylogger and all of a sudden we find it spread across building 30 on all the Linux systems up there, we'll know who to tap. All right? Yes, sir?
Now in this script, I noticed that there is a set minus n and set minus x. How do you
Okay. So when we go through the scripts and we take a look at this, right, you have to remember that these are debug commands, all right? So you can debug it as you run. Because remember, if it's a keylogger and it's doing the right thing, you'll see one thing on your screen, but you'll see a completely different thing in your logs. So you're going to want to make sure that you debug those, and that's why I made sure that those were in there, right? Because these are your debug switches, set and set X, right? So on broken code 3B, you probably have the wrong shell type, right? So it's not transportable, right? He sets up his email to audit log to a group, right? So if you decide that you want to do it that way, then you're going to have to make sure that you change logman over to somebody else, right? And then clean up exit. And he goes through, the comments are actually pretty good, right? But did he actually do everything that he needed to do in here? Because he's calling mailx, right? So mailx is the send mail program that he was using at the time. Does everyone have that, right? So you're going to want to make sure that if you choose the mail version, that you're choosing a common email package to go along with it, right? Then he exits, then he sets up his traps, then he defines his variables, he writes his script, logdir, log file. And again, though, because he hard codes that, right, we can have a little bit harder day with it because it is hard coded. And it may not necessarily be where we want it to go. Right, and then it's broken code 3A. Basically, same thing. We have a problem with the shell already. Right? Now, here's the interesting part in how he did it. He declared his variables, but he really goes into lengthy on what these functions do and how they work the way they work. So odds are highly likely most of you are going to work with broken code A, right? Because it's really well documented, right? And you'll be able to spot the issues with it a lot quicker. If you get broken code A to work, go and work on broken code B. It's a little bit more elegant and it's got a few more problems with it, right? But again, there's more than one way of solving a problem, right? And the other thing I thought was interesting too is that when he tests a log file, he actually keeps a track record of the attempts that are doing. And he keeps on incrementing those attempts, right? So if there's a problem with the log file, you can actually see how many attempts were made. It could tell me the user's doing something weird. It could tell me the user's not doing something that they're supposed to be doing, right? However many times. If you're logging in and logging out a lot in a couple of milliseconds or a couple of seconds, it may be a bot. His computer may already be remote controlled and that account may already be in someone else's hands. And it may not actually be the person's fault, right? It's sort of like finding pornography on your boss's computer. Did he really download pornography or did one of his coworkers get really, really tanked off at him and drop a whole bunch of porn on his computer and then call human resources, right? So you have to kind of think about this. If your attempts keep on incrementing a lot over a very short period of time, right? If you have 100 attempts in 30 minutes, then that account may no longer be as secure as we think it is. So that's why I like the attempt bit, because it will help me solve out whether this is a person or whether this is a computer program. All right? So that's why I really like broken code A. And he closes it, and he does this whole thing with it. He traps it, he writes it out to the log file, adds a final date timestamp to it, and then we have to fix this whole echo out. So if we want to echo out, how would we echo out to the text file rather than to the TTY? Right? So we want to make sure we're not echoing out to the string because we don't want to tip our user off, but we want to make sure our program ran right. So you could actually append this to the file, all these echo statements out. Right? So that would be the single caret rather than the double caret. Oh wait, no, it would be the double caret rather than the single caret, because if you accidentally single caret it, then you zeroize your file, and all you've got is your echo output, not what they're actually doing on the keystroke. Yes, sir.
So the idea behind SendMail is if you send it directly to email, or you send it to that computer the next time you log in?
If you were to use SendMail to drop the file off, the one thing you want to make sure of is that you don't actually see the file, because you don't want to become involved. Right? It may be something you don't want to become part of, or you're not authorized to become part of. So if you bug someone's computer and you send it straight to HR and legal and then the bit bucket, dev null, right? Then it becomes legal and human resource problem. You've done your job. You don't have to go through log files and comb and parse and then try to work with that person on a daily basis wondering what the heck they're up to, right? Because that's one of the hardest things for a security engineer, is if you know that there's another security engineer or someone you work with daily and you know that they're being heavily monitored and you know that they're doing something weird that they shouldn't be doing, is trying to stay normal around them. Right? That's a really hard thing to do. I don't know anyone that does it successfully. So your own body language and how your relationship to that person changes over time can be a big indication to that person that's being monitored that something's up. Right? So if you're at work and you get a creepy feeling because everyone's kind of ignoring you at work or they're acting differently towards you than they did a week ago, worry. Right? That something's going on that you may not be aware of. Right? So that's why this is kind of interesting. He gives way too much stuff to the user. And again, if he echoed it out to me and I saw this on my screen, I'd either be tearing the computer apart or I would just simply stop using it and call the help desk or the security department. Actually, I'd probably call the security department. Why is there a keylogger on my box? And then the security department's got to go through. And the bad part would be as if it was one of my security bros that actually wrote the keylogger. Yeah, I'd have problems with that. Because now I don't trust that person anymore. So that's why you really want to keep these things quiet. You definitely don't want to. Not at work. In this instance, yes, you do. But, right? And you have to understand, right? Remember, one of the few investigations that I've actually worked on where I actually successfully caught the person was because the person did something stupid, right? They actually were writing blog entries using real names, real company names, real department names about how horrible all the people they worked with were, right? And then this bad part is they started printing out their blog entries. And that was the one reason why we caught them, is because every time you printed something, there was the cover sheet with your name on it. That's the only reason why we caught them. We had no idea who it was in the organization, a huge organization, 6,000 people, right? Who's the blogger? I'm not saying, right? But that's the reason why, is because they printed out, they started printing out their blog entries for Lord knows why, right? And it had the cover sheet at work with the cover sheet on it. The cover sheet is so that it makes it easier to file. So if you walk up to the printer and there's a big stack of paper, you can split it out and put it in everybody's little cubicle, right? Or you can become the person that hands out paper that they printed out. Yes, sir?
So for something like this, when you write the script, and the only thing that I can think of is for the specific user is to invoke it in like the .bashrc
Yes.
file. So then if we do it that way, then it's going to be under their user. So when their user creates the log file, it's going to give them permission to that log file. How do you prevent that from happening without changing it to root? And then, or if you have to change
Now,
it to root,
that's why one of the people actually trapped it in memory before they wrote out the log file, so that when it got the trap command, it would write everything out as root or the person logged in, and then move the file to someplace else, right? And that's one of the ways you can do it. You can either write on the fly using vi, but understanding that the user may actually see it if they're aware enough, or write it all to memory and then on the trap exit write it out, and then change the permissions on it.
So basically store it in memory,
Mm-hmm.
and then as soon as they're done, as soon as they exit out,
Then you write everything off.
but that can get big.
It can get huge depending on what they're doing. And that's where the trade-off in performance is going to come along with, right? And that's why there's two different ways to kind of slice and dice this one. You can write a running log file using by, you can write it in memory. And either way, you're going to have a performance and control trade-off. And one of the things I've seen people do is bury it underneath syslog, right? Because most people don't know about syslog and most people don't go there. So what they do is they just write it in the var log directory, because most people won't think of going there. And you name it something innocuous with the date timestamp on it, and they're not, most people won't even notice that or go look. So you kind of need a little bit of help with the ignorance of the user along the way, right? So if it's me, it's a little bit different, but even I don't go into var syslog every time I log in to make sure I'm not being monitored, because 9 times out of 10, I don't care anymore, right?
So if you did that way, you could do it as 660.
Mm-hmm.
So then you would free up the memory that way, and then you just always have the user get it.
Yeah, so if you changed it around and you did it as 660.
But then you'd also just run a hash on it. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, all that can be scripted in the bash RC file on trap. Does it kind of make sense? Kind of cool? You guys ready to start bugging everybody else's computer?
No, just my own curiosity.
Just for your own education. All right. Huh? You know, I'm not going to be surprised if the keyloggers that people write end up on other people's computers at this point, right? Because you got to test them out somehow, right? So whatever you do, don't go check your bank account. Go check your PayPal account and all the rest of it. Because you type in PayPal.com, you type in your username and password. Remember, you're typing on your keyboard. It's going to capture all that, right? Also, don't search on how to kill your significant other.
I've seen a case about that.
Uh-huh. Yep, the employee was searching on the internet. Uh-huh.
No way, really?
Yes. Yeah.
And when you do, don't use
That's awesome.
for, because apparently presidents investigators don't have Firefox. That was what the case answer before, so they didn't have Firefox.
Yeah.
Why not?
Because they were
Yeah, because they didn't notice the 3 browsers on the computer.
Oh, so they just went to Internet Explorer.
Uh-huh.
The one that nobody uses.
Mm-hmm.
They had some smart forensics guys.
Yeah. We're not going to say anything about the forensics investigation ability of people. However, what I do know is that a lot of people have gotten off from doing really, truly heinous things because the forensics investigator was not quite correct on that one. And it would lay odds that a forensics investigator will not notice this.
A keylogger?
Mm-hmm. They won't notice the home-rolled script. They really won't. I wish I'll put money on it. Put something. How many people here are in the forensics class? I'm going to talk to Ron, see if we can see if you guys can spot the keylogger. All right. Any questions? Are you guys good? Make sense? Warm, fuzzy, happy? Awesomely content with life? All right. So it doesn't matter which one of the examples you use, A or B. Each one has its good things and each one has its bad things. All right. So if you get both, yeah, I'll give you bonus points. And there's also a new feature in the file because some people were telling me that they got bored. Bored is bad. So here's a bonus question. If you can do this with all currently logged in users, I'll give you an extra 10 points. Which one? You can do this with all users. Oh, yeah, hey. God, jeez.
Yeah, where's the spell checker you're rating us about?
It's all spell check.
Grammar check.
Can you do this with all users? Thank you. All right, so you pointed it out first, so you get the 1 bonus point for catching the instructor being a boob.
But you
Huh?
failed the course for pointing it out.
All right. All right. Can you do this with all users? If you can do this with will. Oh, God. Jeez. Well, you know, the bad part is that we're taping this now, so they're going to know. All right. Yes, we have video evidence of this. How's that? Is that better? Make more sense?
I liked it the old way.
I liked it the old way. Nice. All righty, guys. So, how's everybody doing with their other script? All right.
When will this script be due?
This
That's next
scripting.
week, right?
Yep. This will be due next Friday.